Our top story tonight, some going down in November.
Wars, spending.
There has got to be something big a-brewing.
They're using geese to guard prisons in Brazil. Does Biden know what
Immigration
Mexico
policies.
is? Would you scare Joe Biden? What are we laughing at? I think
Butthole.
Billy Mays was real.
I'm a world-class skeptic.
I don't know anything about Hunter Biden. I don't know who's big into cocaine and laptops. Why is that our problem? Complete, absolute incompetence. Like, who funds the news? It's a freaking inside job, man. That the entire world's a stage and everything's fake.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Veritas Road. Carson, back here with Murph and Thomas. Our top story tonight, smart is the new sexy. The slogan of Dolce & Gabbana's latest product line took social media by storm earlier today, teasing more than just a new exciting scent. The perfumery has partnered with tech industry leaders to develop their most recent offering, which promises not only to elevate the natural scent of its subject, but also to be made with nootropic botanicals reported to increase intelligence and boost productivity and efficiency. So be sure to check your local department store this coming February to get that special someone a bottle of Elon's Musk. That's the best I got.
Ooh, that one was, not going to lie, hard to follow all of that. I get it, though. You were talking
It was
about
long.
perfume, and you're relating it to Elon,
Right.
whose his last name is like a stink. That was the point.
Right. Yeah. You made it there.
Yeah.
You made it there.
Well done. Carson
right.
does one of these every time. He writes them.
Oh, yeah. We do
And
one of these
you
all
wrote
the time.
that?
I did.
That's an actual article.
No, I wrote that.
You wrote that.
That's the point, man. It's satire.
Yeah.
That's very talented. I'm impressed.
Thanks, bud. Appreciate
that's
it.
good.
I write one of those every week. That's what we open
Nobody
the
can
podcast
hear me
with.
clapping, but I'm clapping.
You can clap louder. You can clap in the mic. We're back here with longtime friend Robert Thomas, by the way, guys, who we had on, what was that, episode 3?
Yeah. Boy,
Which,
the
if you
sound,
go back and
was-
listen
that
to
was
it,
a
it sounds like
lifetime
dog
ago.
Yeah,
the sound on that was really bad. It was outside.
it was
but
terrible. Yeah. But it'll be better tonight.
That's right. Look at this high production value. We've skyrocketed.
This is you people can't see all this, but this is a very high quality outfit for a podcast.
For two broke.
I mean,
Yeah. So let's talk about the rest of the shit on the news, John. I've got 2 stories tonight. Just go ahead and click on that first one. So apparently this woman is offering up a response saying we need to be worried about another pandemic. And I just thought this was insane because A, CNN had her on and she basically talks to them for like a couple of minutes and doesn't actually say anything. And 2, I think they've realized like nobody's buying Fauci's bullshit anymore. They've realized they can't trot him out when they need to scare the public. So they picked this new woman who apparently was on like Trump's pandemic response team in 2020, and I just found that upsetting.
Well, I'm reading that right there. Okay. And first of all, her last name is Burks?
Yeah.
That's kind of, you replace the X with a D and you've got bird, and there she is talking about a bird flu. But hasn't the bird flu already happened?
Supposedly it's going on right now. Apparently there's a bunch
Didn't
of
bird flu happen in like 2004? It was like bird flu, then swine flu, then H1N1.
Well, H1N1 was swine flu.
Yeah. I thought we already dealt with bird flu, and monkeypox was the next thing. But
Monkeypox is over now.
I remember Ebola was going to kill us.
oh,
all.
Ebola.
Yeah,
I
Ebola
mean,
was a big thing.
Yeah.
And then there was Zika or something, right?
Zika was going to kill all
Yeah.
our babies.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you should be scared, guys. Be scared. This woman's telling you should be scared and you shouldn't go talk to anybody because Fauci can't do it anymore because everybody realized he was full of shit.
Well, Fauci's old, right? I mean, he's in his 80s, isn't he?
Is he in his 80s?
I'm pretty
He's looking good for being in his 80s then.
I'm pretty sure he's like 80-something.
Huh.
So he's probably
He's
not
creepy.
he's not going to be around much longer.
Yeah.
So you
So-
got to wheel out a new person.
I found that upsetting. Just wanted to share that with you. Let's go on to the next one, John. We'll go on to my next one. This one's a little bit less serious. So CNN came out with the most stylish people of 2024. Guess who's back in the public spotlight? Scroll down to the end. Monica Lewinsky making a comeback.
What?
And she's coming out against some controversial issues. She is standing up against bullying and cyberbullying. thank heavens, the woman who blew the president in the Oval Office is taking a stand against cyberbullying. I'm proud of her. She is a feminist figure.
I want to see her, dude.
That's her right there.
That's her?
That's her.
I mean, she looks pretty good for being that old.
Well, she does. Yeah, you got to be hot to blow Bill Clinton. Well, unless you're Hillary.
Well, that's just unfortunate.
Let's be honest, Hillary ain't blowing Bill Clinton.
That's true. She probably hasn't done that in decades. But, yeah, so she's the people's choice for the most stylish woman of 2024 is Monica Lewinsky.
Did you vote for her, Thomas?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I am very in tune with people's fashion.
I believe you are. You're wearing that sexy vest.
Yeah, came out of a goodie basket at Christmas 2 or 3 years ago.
I love that.
My grandmother gave me a big bag of stuff. We called it I don't know what we called it. It was just a huge bag of whatever she bought at Goodwill, and this is what this is.
Nice.
And it's actually really nice.
That's a good family tradition. I like that.
It was awesome. Mimi did it all year. She had like 13 bags she was trying to fill. So
my mom does that as well. She shops at Goodwill year round. I don't have the stamina for that. I don't understand people who can shop at Goodwill for days on end. I don't get it.
Oh, but dude, the Goodwill book section, you can spend hours just picking through books.
I can't do it.
Not so much a clothes guy, but the books, I've got some good ones.
Fair enough.
And I mean, and like that's the thing is if you go to the right ones, like ones in certain areas, like they have like
it's true. You go to the nice Goodwills.
Yeah, well, like name brand things, and it's like worn once, or like sometimes the tags are still on it, and it's like we want $5 for a brand new Brooks Brothers shirt, and it's like
right.
Well, yeah, it's gonna have to be bought.
Yeah, I'm gonna get that. I'm gonna take that home.
Especially if it's like it's your size, it's just like it's an XL. I'm an XL. Like
yeah. No, yeah,
I mean, $5. Yeah, let's do it.
They have great stuff sometimes. I just don't have the stamina to look through all of the shirts, all of the books. Well, it's just so much effort.
This is I don't know how your viewers feel about this. I'm just bougie enough that I'm just like, I'm going to go to the store. I need a shirt. I'm going to go to the store. I'm going to buy a shirt.
Right.
And I'm going to be done with it. I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to buy what I want. I'm going to be done.
That's so much easier than scribbling through Goodwill racks for hours.
I mean, that's what your wife's for. She goes to Goodwill and she goes shopping. And
anybody here have a wife?
She goes through.
Yeah, I was about to say, thanks, guys. I was about to say,
I don't have one. Do you have one? I don't have one. You have one?
Not anymore.
Oh, should we hug?
After we can all hug.
Yeah, we're kind of like constrained here. Forget that.
Yeah. All right. So let's go on to Murph's story. What do you have?
Monica Lewinsky still got it. All right. My story.
She does.
Look at this, y'all.
Oh
Biden has signed 50 bills in one day. All right.
That's a lot of work for him. He's probably tired.
That's kind of impressive for him.
Yeah.
Just simply, it's a right off the bat. He didn't read any. How can you read 50 bills in one day?
You can't.
Unless they're like one pagers, but like none of them are one
they're all like
anymore.
600 pages long that they filibuster.
Even if they're like 30.
Yeah.
Like, you're not reading that.
So he's just signing crap. So right then and there, you know that he is not controlling this country if he has no idea what he's signing. He's just signing away.
Right.
And you could argue, well, all the presidents do that. Probably they do. But you ain't reading 50 bills in one day. Let's look at some of these top five.
Stop institutional child abuse. That's controversial. Wow.
What really blew my mind is this number 2.
What the hell? Was it not the bald eagle becomes the national bird? Was it not the national bird before?
Apparently, we now have Joe Biden to thank for that.
Well, you know, it's legacy building, man. He's on the way out. He's got to secure his legacy.
Remember when Benjamin Franklin wanted it to be a turkey? You know who stopped that? Joseph Biden.
Really?
He stopped it from being a turkey.
He probably was there back then. I mean, that was, a lifetime ago.
Yeah, he probably was one of Ben Franklin's contemporaries.
That's the message I took away from this article. I mean, how insane is that? And, of course, we got to protect the Indians.
Was it not? I thought it was the national bird before.
Apparently not.
It was just a national symbol, I guess.
Something, yeah, I guess.
It was on all the logos. I mean,
Yeah, they're endangered.
Logos.
Supposedly. Are they still endangered? Are those still on the endangered list?
I don't think anymore. They've made a big comeback.
Okay, nice. Oh, there's Paris Hilton. All right. What's she got to do with? Why is she? Biden signs bill backed by who cares? Who cares about Biden signing a bill backed by Paris Hilton? Why is that on the news?
I don't know. I just thought it was, first of all, a lot of things. Second of all, you're not reading 50 bills. And, third of all, there's some crazy bills that he did sign.
That's true.
Like, Stop Campus Hazing Act. Like, how you going to enforce that?
You can't. That's the dumb thing.
You just take college kids and you make sure that you throw them in prison and ruin their life.
Yeah.
We're supposed to do that, right? That's a good thing to do. I feel like that's good, right?
I've kind of realized that it's best to just let the courts decide things. Like, don't write the laws. Just like, hey, this was a problem. Let's go. We've got enough laws on the books. Just, take it to the court and let don't make the judge be like, all right, this kid did something. It was bad. We're going to, we have to ruin this kid's life because of whatever. Because like mandatory sentencing and all the rest of that, it's just kind of a.
That's a good point.
You know how I feel about that, Thomas? Like, I agree with that. But you know what the federal government should have to do with that? Absolutely freaking nothing. That's a freaking state and local jurisdiction issue. Somebody screws up like that in your area, then they deal with it. Why are the feds? I mean, how much money do you think we're spending on this? Initiating all these programs for all these different colleges? Feds should have nothing to do with that. It ain't our the feds should be focused on defense, We've gotten so far away from the Constitution, it ain't even funny.
Under the original Constitution, the federal government only had authority over 4, quote-unquote crimes, which is treason, piracy, counterfeiting, and then crimes against the laws of nations. Everything else is protected by state policing power. So they don't have any authority to do any of it.
Are you going to go to law school?
No.
You should go to law school.
I just read.
I should have gone to law school. I wish I had gone to law school. But
You still could?
Yeah, that's what people keep telling me. And then I'm like, I've been out of school like 10 years now.
Oh.
I know that's strange for somebody like you, Carson. But,
yeah, it is.
But
I just perpetually live in college. That's my life.
I've been out of school for like 10 years, and I couldn't go back to school. I couldn't care enough and
be a giant pain in the ass.
Well, it's not like it's not like you're just going to an easy one. It's not like you're gonna fumble your way through an MBA.
Right.
It's like this is a real school where you actually have to read stuff and write real papers and like.
I don't know, man. One of my exes went to law school and she seems to be doing pretty well, and she was not that smart.
Well, I
feel like if she could do it, you could definitely do it.
I have met some lawyers where I'm like, how did you get through law school?
I think that places like law school and even places like medical school that everybody looks at and they think of them as like these impressive higher learning institutions. It's mostly a function of like how much time and effort do you have to devote to this thing. It's not a function of intelligence. And so
totally.
If you come from
accounting.
Yeah, well, yeah, there you go. Yeah. And so like if you come from like let's say a wealthier family that can afford you the time to not have, not work your way through med school, which I've known people who have done that. But if can afford you the time to not work your way through med school, then guess what? You're probably going to do pretty well. If you're having to spend your nights moonlighting at the local clinic because you don't have the cash to make it through next week, it's going to be a different story because you're way the hell busier. And so I think it's more of a function of that than actual ability. So I mean, you definitely have the ability.
Yeah. That's always been my problem in life is I learn things because I need to learn them or I want to learn them. And if I don't need or want to learn it, I'm not going to learn it. Does that make any sense?
I think that's true for most people.
Like I can't care about something that I don't care about enough to learn it if I don't have to learn it.
That makes sense. I feel like I'm the same way.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to go, let's think of something random. I'm not going to learn the names of, like, the American Girl dolls because I don't care. And, and nobody's holding a gun to my head to force me to do so. Therefore, I know nothing about it. So that I follow that logic, Thomas.
Yeah.
It's like, and I don't overly care about tangible personal property or any of that or what is a digital good. But
fair enough.
People are willing to pay me a lot of money in my professional life to understand the difference and to do whatever.
So it's worth something to you to remember that.
And so, like, I've learned that, not out of interest. I mean, it's kind of interesting, but, like, it's the same kind of interesting, like, watching paint dry. It's like, it's kind of fun after a little while, after you've watched it. But, like, you're not going to just sit there and plop down and say, I'm going to watch some paint dry.
Right. Well, I think that's a problem with higher education on the whole, is you're learning a lot of stuff that's borderline useless, and you're not learning how to marry it to an actual practical skill. You're not learning how to marry it to something that's going to provide for you or anyone else. You're simply there to be indoctrinated. And that's a problem, especially at a lot of these higher learning institutions that claim to be there for the sake of educating. They're not. They're not there for the sake of educating. They're there for producing people who are little robots to go out and do exactly what the corporations who pay for that college to exist want them to do. That is, in my opinion, what most colleges like that are there for.
Well, the problem with education in general is that American education is kind of modeled after the idea of a liberal arts education, kind of the idea of a Renaissance man.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have talked about that before, but this idea that a person should be familiar with a broad range of subjects, not necessarily an expert or passionate about them, but just familiar with them.
Yeah, no, that's what got me into trouble in school. I wanted to I wanted to major in everything, and life doesn't work like that at all.
Well, and that's the thing is the idea behind an American education is it's a liberal arts, Renaissance type education.
Right.
You get exposed to everything, and then you're going to have more dedicated, high end, expert classes in the things that you really, are trying to major in. Right.
Bore down into
so like
something.
if you're a business student, you're not just going to take you'll take a general, literature class so that you can say that you've been exposed to it, but then they're really going to drill you down into accounting and finance and statistics and data,
which I think more and more I'm having issues with all of the extraneous nonsense that they seem to add in to a college education. Like, it's great, you want a well-rounded population, whatever, but at the end of the day, if I'm going into engineering or if I'm going to go be an English major, like if I'm going into engineering, there's no reason for me to be reading Nathaniel Hawthorne. If I'm going to be an English major, there's no reason for me to take differential calculus. There's no point. So why are you having me do it? If I want to study those things on my own time, great. It's the concept that you can't be responsible for your own life. We're going to take that responsibility. We're going to shoulder it, and you're just going to have to deal with it. And like, people need to be able to take responsibility for them. That's not a college's job. That's your job. Either learn it on your own or don't. But
and that's all part of the problem with it all too. Is it's all designed to help teach and foster critical thinking, right?
Allegedly.
If you look at like old school tests from like the 1920s, like, all of the questions are subjective. They're like explain, define, like compare and analyze, and do all this critical thinking and whatever. And the problem is it is subjective, and they replaced it with objective A, B, C, or D.
Right.
Because like that's the thing is 2 + 2 is 4. If you pick an answer that's not 4, there's no reasoning that is going to lead you to an answer other than 4. And so they've replaced all the curriculum with, we want objective answers.
Right.
And so the system is set up to foster objective answers instead of subjective reasoning. And, there are courses that lend themselves more to objective answers, like math.
Right.
Math is objective. Like, you did the problem right and you got the right answer, or you didn't.
Right.
But, like, history is a subject that's subjective, there are on things that are considered non-controversial, there are 3 or 4 different viewpoints on the same event.
Yeah.
And and so it's just kind of how the way the world works is, but we don't teach it that way anymore.
And if I may interject, what you just said, there are 3 or 4 different viewpoints on the same event, which is why, appealing to experts in any kind of logical debate is a fallacy, because experts disagree on things
all the time.
So if you're going to just appeal to an expert as the basis of any kind of argument, you got a problem, because experts don't agree. So.
Right. Which, not to harken back to the whole like the pandemic lady thing again, but like one of the things you hear about in the medical field all the time is like, oh, well, there's a consensus about this or that. So what? It doesn't matter if there's a consensus or not. Like, what does the logic of the thing say? Do you have any studies that point one direction or another, or did a bunch of moron doctors just get together and agree on something?
Well, another problem with consensus is, let's take the idea of heliocentrism versus geocentrism. At one point, it was the consensus that geocentrism was the thing, right?
Right.
But then, allegedly, we've come and proved that wrong. So there's why you can't agree with consensus, because consensus can change.
Yeah.
Well, it's not my problem is I'm a status quo kind of guy, right? Like, I want to just kind of go with the flow, and like, it's like if I don't know a reason that a mainstream opinion is wrong, I'm going to default to that, right? And now when I start, hearing this is the mainstream answer, and I start seeing data or results that don't jive with that answer, well, then I'm going to have a question. Well, why explain how these results occur when this answer is supposed to solve that and prevent this from happening?
Yeah.
So clearly this isn't the answer. But, I think part of the problem with that in people's lives is unless you're willing to become an expert yourself, you do have to defer a little bit to experts.
You're right.
Now, you don't have to take one expert as the sole authority. You can listen to a bunch of different experts. And you can even find probably experts that might disagree with a consensus or a mainstream opinion, and you might find that their explanation is a better fit.
Right.
For whatever reason. Whether it's because of your worldview or because you're on their side for whatever reason. And, and that's the thing. You got to be careful with your own biases, but
Yeah.
That to me, it's just kind of like I'm never going to care or learn enough about medicine to be able to diagnose or deal with stuff, right?
Right.
So I'm gonna defer to doctors who've spent years either learning or practicing or whatever. Now, when a doctor's like, your blood pressure's not that big a deal, and I'm like, I'm smart enough to know that 140 over 90 is a little high. I'm gonna find another doctor that's like, we're gonna do something about that.
Okay. Interesting. Any thoughts, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Thomas. You're always going to have to defer to experts in forming opinions on anything because we don't have the time or energy to look at everything. The problem comes is the things that you hold closest to you that form the basis of your worldview are the things that you're going to have to look at the most, right? And I feel like intellectual laziness is when we don't do that and when we get in trouble. What you should be an expert in is the foundational beliefs of your worldview and the assumptions that create your worldview. That's the thing you should become an expert in and not defer to someone else. In my opinion.
Yeah, I like that. That makes a lot of sense because you should at the very least be aware of what your worldview is and the biases it's going to lend itself toward, and then you can analyze and address information as it comes in a little bit more appropriately. And I think one of the big things to take away from that concept is if you hear something, if you learn something and it upsets you, maybe think about it a little bit harder because it's probably challenging that world. That's probably a good thing that it's challenging whatever that worldview happens to be. And so, be okay with things pissing you off.
It is. One of my foundational core tenets in my worldview is that Jesus Christ is the Son of the Creator. Okay? Now, if somebody comes at me and says that's not true, I have to be able to not react in anger, but listen to what they're saying, analyze what they're saying, and compare it using reasoning to what I know. And the only way you can do that is if you have established why you believe that, okay? Because if you don't know why you believe that, you're going to react in anger.
Right.
Does that make sense?
I see that all the time.
And that's what not to go off on this Church of Christ tangent, but that's when we screw up with atheists so many times, is we don't understand our own position. We just react in anger.
Fair enough.
I agree.
Fair enough. So what about all these people telling me we should go to war with Ukraine? What about all these people?
Oh, dude, they're my people.
Those are your people?
No. I need to qualify that answer heavily, but I mean, yeah, I generally support what we've been doing in Ukraine.
Okay, explain why.
Okay, so where's a good place? Where is a good place to start? The problem is Russia is under Putin is an expansionist, imperialist type power, and so the problem for Russia is Putin wants to restore the greatness of the Soviet Union. And that's kind of his thing. He's said that before. I think he even talks about that in his interview with Tucker Carlson. I need to listen to that. It's still on my to-do list. I haven't gotten there yet.
That's fair.
It's only been a year. But anyway, so he wants to restore that. Well, part of the reason they want to do that is from a military strategic point of view. The Russian territory is this vast open terrain, and it's not very densely populated. And so but in that vast wilderness, there is some land that's good land. It's got minerals, it's got farmland, it's got whatever. They just don't have enough people there to or any terrain features to mount a defense. And so historically, what the Russian solution has been, hey, we're going to go out, we're going to expand out to these different gaps or mountain ranges or whatever that are around our territory. And if we do that, we can control the access points to our country. And so that's a critical thing for them. There are 9 different gaps. There are areas that they need to control to be able to have that security. After World War II, either through the Soviet Union directly or through proxy states that were communist, they controlled all 9 of those gaps. When the Soviet Union fell, they lost 7 of them. They only have 2. And part of the problem is what he's been doing. He started in Georgia with South Ossetia and Chechnya and all these other territories to the south, because that's on the way to a different mountain gap in the south.
Okay.
And so he wants to continue to expand out until he gets to those gaps so that he can secure the Russian territory.
Well, yeah, that rings a bell. Wasn't there war in Georgia not, like 5 or 6 years ago? Wasn't that a thing? Was that a thing?
2009 was one of them, I think. Maybe 2012.
You might be thinking of Crimea. Putin invaded Crimea in 2014, took it over.
I thought I remembered there being like an issue with Georgia at some point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Total non sequitur.
2009.
And then there's Crimea.
Georgia has the deepest cave in the world, I believe. It's over 6,000 feet deep. But
I know you like caves.
I do.
That's cool.
Okay, so.
But that's the thing is, and the problem with this Ukraine war is, Ukraine doesn't actually control any of those access points to Russia, but it's on the way to 2 of them. And so basically, once he gets through with Ukraine and gets what he wants out of Ukraine, he's not going to stop because he still doesn't have what he wants. He's going to keep going west. Well, the problem is the next countries after Ukraine are NATO countries, which means when he gets involved with NATO countries, we're going to have to decide if the NATO charter is worth the paper it's written on.
Right, and here's one of the points I wanted to get to, because my understanding, and this is not my area of expertise. You probably know a lot more about this than I do.
I'm
so
an amateur enthusiast.
Maybe lend a little more light to this for me. So my understanding is NATO wasn't supposed to move past a certain point after the end of, was it World War II or the Cold War, somewhere in there? NATO was supposed to stay at a particular point, moving east towards Russia, and they kept encroaching on that territory till now they're basically right next door.
That is the Russian narrative.
Okay.
That's how they feel about it. Putin is of the opinion that NATO agreed that they would not expand into the former Warsaw Pact area of influence, which would be countries, all the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland, who else? Probably Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary.
Russia has a little exclave right by Estonia.
Yeah, Kaliningrad.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Very interesting, that whole. It's like a mini Russia just in the Baltic states.
Well, it's because it used to be Königsberg, Germany, and they took it from the Germans. And, and because it wasn't technically Polish territory and it wasn't anything else, they're just kind of like, this is ours, and we'll keep it. So when the Soviet Union fell apart, they're like, well, this is still ours, and it's mostly a military base anyway.
I feel like we can support that as Americans. We did that here. They get to do that there, right? That's how that should work.
I was about to say, nobody has a problem with Kaliningrad for the most. Well, I mean, it gives military planners a little bit of pause, but it just kind of is what it is. You had a serious question, and I have rambled and lost it.
It's okay. So I've heard from a number of sources.
NATO expansion. NATO expansion. So the thing was, NATO never signed any kind of an agreement where they're like, we will not add new members. But what they loosely agreed to was like, hey, we're not going over here and poaching former comm bloc countries and adding them into NATO and whatever. The thing is that all of those countries have dealt with Russia and the Soviet Union in the past. Poland never wanted to be a part of the communist bloc. They were forced into it because they were occupied by the Russians, and the Russians are like, you'll be communist or you'll be dead. And so they were like, well, we'll be communist.
Better communist than dead.
Yeah, and that's kind of how they felt about it.
Better red than dead.
And as soon as the Soviet Union collapsed and all the Iron Curtain fell down, the Polish were like, we're out. Like, we don't like the Russians. We don't want to be a part of any of this. We're done.
All right.
And so they're like, hey, NATO, what do we
Can
need to
sign
do?
up?
Yeah, what do we need to do to get in? And so they start doing the process. And what has accelerated all of this NATO expansion has not been NATO. It's been Russia. Russia has always been their own worst enemy because they don't really want to have a diplomatic solution. What Russia wants is they want to get their way, and they want the people that they're dealing with to just do what they said. And the problem is when you're dealing with sovereign independent nations, and as America has figured out as well, they tend to have their own independent way of thinking about things and their own interests.
Okay.
They don't just do what you tell them to do for the most part,
Right.
unless they're puppet states.
Right.
And the problem is all those countries were like, hey, we're free, we're independent, we have somewhat fair elections, and our lives are better than they were under the Soviet Union.
Right.
We would like to keep that going.
Yeah.
And they all realize if we have to fight the Russians, we don't have a chance.
So let's join NATO.
So who's a security guarantor that will protect our independence? And NATO's the best game in town.
That's okay. That's an interesting commentary on that. So,
and that's the other thing is Putin would act like NATO was just like, snap, you're in.
right.
NATO has standards. Like, you have to meet certain qualifications for democracy, for economics. Like, there are rules to being in NATO, and you have to meet all of those. Then you have to apply for it. And then all the NATO member states have to sit around in a circle and say, it's okay for this country to join.
Sounds like I'm trying to get into a country club.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically what it is.
Jeez.
Except, it's the largest arms trade in the world. But, I mean, that's the country club.
It sounds like just a bunch of gangsters, honestly.
It's not that bad.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's mostly not that bad. But that was the big deal. Was so when Sweden and Finland were trying to get in 2 years ago, there was a big holdup because Turkey's like, hey, we're mad at you guys because of they supported some Kurdish groups that the Turks hate the Kurds.
Right.
And so they're like, well, you support these people that we think are terrorists. We're not going to let you in NATO.
Everybody thinks everybody else is a terrorist these days.
And then the Hungary Prime Minister Orbán or whatever did the same thing, and eventually it all got worked out after people paid enough people off, and it was fine.
Unpopular opinion, calling people terrorists is just like calling people homophobic. It's just popular. People call people homophobic, people call people terrorists. That's what people do now. Is that off? I feel like that's correct, right?
It depends on your perspective, though, right? People like we would consider, lots of, Muslim-aligned groups terrorists, right? Because, they come over to our country and they blow stuff up,
That's
right?
what they tell us. But
they view it as, in their minds, it's a holy war and we are fighting for God and we are killing the infidels.
Well, I mean,
it's not terrorism. It's a legitimate war against an enemy.
We can talk about domestic terrorism here in the States a little bit more extensively. I don't know that there are too many Muslims committing acts of terror here, personally.
We have something called the Department of Homeland Security that's very
there's that. But I mean, everybody's favorite example is 9/11, and we didn't talk about 9/11.
Oh boy.
I mean, that was your government had a big.
Wouldn't you rather talk about drones in Ukraine,
dude? What is okay? What's the deal with that?
Drones?
Yeah, what is the deal with all these drones? Not just in Ukraine, but they're in New Jersey.
They're in Murray County.
They're in California. They're all over the place.
They're in Murray County, Tennessee. They got video of them.
Yeah.
On the
on
the iHeart Columbia page.
There you go.
You're in our lovely hometown.
That's
Stay here
right.
for more local news.
Yeah. What's the deal with all these drones?
So I can't speak for what's going on in New Jersey. I know that's a thing. I haven't read about it. Supposedly I've heard that they made arrests related to that. People are.
I heard something about
violating
that.
rules, FAA rules or whatever. I don't know. I didn't read it. I just heard the headline, So, but
Who knows?
anyway, in Ukraine, the drone deal is so it's a product of necessity mostly. Drones serve multiple purposes over there in that war. Some of them are for what they call ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. And so you fly that drone over the front line and you're like, okay, well, the enemy has machine gun here and here. And, oh, we've got a drone overhead. These guys are crossing the trenches and they're coming at us. And so we want to be ready and, shoot at these guys, right?
Right.
And so, that's common. You can do that role with, you can just put a guy in a truck and drive him over the hillside, put him up on a ridge and sit there with a pair of binoculars and say, okay, I see guys over here and blah, 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 and this is what they're doing. But
Okay.
that's that's the low end of what they're using them for. What they've gotten the most notoriety for is they will, equip them with some kind of a device where they can drop a grenade or a mortar shell, and they'll drop that on, people that are advancing on their position, or they'll fly these one way, they call them kamikaze drones or suicide drones, and they just put a big explosive on there. They fly it into a tank and blow it up.
So it's just like a missile,
Yeah.
but
and
not.
And so that's the thing is, Elon Musk made a big headline. He said, we should ditch the F-35 and we should buy more drones. The problem with that is, what drones are you buying? Okay, he's like, oh, the F-35 is too expensive. We should just ditch that and buy drones. Well, if you're buying cheap drones like what they're using over there in Ukraine,
Mm-hmm.
the problem with a cheap drone is it's cheap, which means it's not very resilient. It doesn't have a long range. It operates in this spectrum of like electromagnetic whatever. So
Yeah.
it's on like the same things like a ham radio or whatever.
Right. Easy to mess with.
There's only so many of those, so you can only ever have so many of them up in the air at one time because
Right.
they start overlapping signals. And that's one of the things that's happened is like, Russians are like flying their drone and then they overlap and they're interfered with and they're getting like the Ukrainian drone feed, and they're Ukrainian and vice versa.
That
and
sounds
so
great.
so Ukrainians are sitting there and they're like, wait, this isn't our drone. Oh, they're looking at our positions.
Oh
this
no, I
is
see
bad.
myself. This is a
Yeah,
problem.
it's like, ooh, this isn't good. And so they've had that go on. And so that's one of the problems with those drones, is they're very susceptible. If it was the Ukrainians don't really have this capability, but the Russians supposedly have decent electromagnetic warfare capabilities. And so you would think that they would just, use their equipment and deny the electromagnetic spectrum so that Ukrainians couldn't use drones. But the Ukrainian drones are still being used and getting through and bombing people and whatever.
Just large scale EMPs that they're using to jam the signal, or what?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert in that kind of warfare, but that's the kinds of things that you would try to do to like just deny the signals and like either freeze or disable the drones, but that's not happening. But the reason that they're using them to do all this stuff is because they don't have enough, what I would call what experts would call precision fire. So like they don't have enough smart bombs or missiles or guided artillery shells or just artillery shells to put on a target and affect the battle space. And so what they've resorted to instead is $1,500 drone, put $40 for the C4 on it, boom, go kill a tank.
You do that in your own backyard.
Pretty much.
I want to know where I can get $40 worth of C4.
I mean,
It sounds like a deal.
I mean, probably from
well, I
our
mean,
government.
when you're making explosives, like the explosive stuff isn't all that expensive. It's all the other stuff that's expensive.
Also, I feel like it'd probably be pretty easy in Ukraine. Aren't they well known to be like the most corrupt weren't they well known to be the most corrupt government in the world for a while? I'm pretty sure that's a thing.
I don't even know anymore, man.
They've had problems with corruption, as have many European democracies. The corruption claims, as of the last say 3 years, are more overblown than real. And especially when people are talking about like military aid, people are like, "Oh, well, our military aid's just on the black market. And it's already in the Middle East, and they sold it for cash." It's like, actually, no, it's not. All of that's accounted for. We the government, the U.S. government has tags on all the stuff that we've given them. So, like, we know where all that is. The problem, and this is actually kind of the sad part, is it's the humanitarian aid, like hey, here's $100,000 to feed your people. That's the stuff that's like been they've had more problems with
Well,
tracking and getting stolen.
The whole ordeal seems sketchy to me. For one, and maybe we can, I don't know if we want to camp out here for a little bit, boys, but like, why do we, the United States, give two little tiny about what's going on in the Ukraine? Okay, that's not our business. I thought back when we were taking civics and people were teaching me about old George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and all those people, they were like, hey, we're not concerned with messing with other people's business. And so it seems odd to me that we have our fingers in all the pies around the world. B, all the stuff that went on with like Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, like we could talk about that at greater length, but like that's super weird. And now we're just giving them billions of dollars.
Let me answer the first part real quick, okay? Why everything you just said died with the Lusitania. Neutrality in the United States died in World War I. That so happened to coincide with the invention of a certain bank. All right?
Okay.
This bank has to spend in order to grow. There's your answer. The reason we are not neutral anymore is because war makes banks money. You print money, the bankers get money. It's that simple. It's a banking scheme. Bankers get rich off of all wars. So as long as there is war, they're making money.
Well, I mean, it's not just the bankers; it's the whole military-industrial complex. I mean, we talked about this a while back, but
yeah,
like,
but
all of
it all goes back to the bank. You have to have money to fund all this stuff, okay? And we ain't paying for it with tax dollars. We're paying for it with new money.
that's true.
We're paying for it
Yeah.
with borrowed money from ultimately the Federal Reserve.
Right.
Okay, there's a huge chain of banks that all leads back to that. All right, and our tax dollars pay interest on that money. It's just that simple, in my opinion. As to why the United States is in it, you know, because I mean, if it, I personally think we have no moral obligation to help them. It's impossible to save everyone if you're going to try to go at it from that angle. Like so let's just say Russia is hypothetically everything they're saying about it is true, and they're just bombing the crap out of innocent people.
I feel like that's got to be a big assumption.
I mean, yeah, well, I think it is. But let's just say that's true, okay, for the sake of argument. Dude, we can't stop all the evil in the world. It's halfway across the world. Some of the stuff we've got to leave up to God. We've got our own huge problems in our own back door.
Sure.
All right, and maybe you could say, well, we can't leave these innocent people out to die. But at the same time, we can't help everybody. It's just a matter of fact, dude. We're not God.
I understand
Sorry.
I understand what you're saying, and broadly, I agree with, hey, stuff that's not our problem, stay out, right? Because that's just good sense. Don't get involved. Like if you have a messy, relationship, all right? Like I don't need the drama, man. Like, it's like
That's fair.
I'm just going to create more problems for you and for me, and it's not going to get any better. I'm not going to make it any better.
Right.
That being said, for Ukraine specifically, I think that the U.S. has several key strategic interests that are served by supporting Ukraine.
And those interests, other than the fact that we want their like there's that whole, have you heard that Lindsey Graham soundbite?
No.
Oh, John, find that Lindsey Graham soundbite about Ukraine. I mean, the concept is he's like, hey, we just want all their stuff.
They just got a lot of minerals out there, Donnie.
Exactly.
They just got a lot of minerals
in the Ukraine.
Yeah. Ukraine has massive reserve. Yeah, they've got a decent amount of lithium out there. They've got a decent amount of bauxite.
Ukraine
got a
is a manufacturing hub, dude.
They
all the
have
minerals are in Russia, dude.
According to what I looked up earlier this week, they have a decent amount of like lithium and bauxite in spades that they're just sitting on. And lithium's a big deal right now with all the batteries and chips we're making.
We got like a crap ton of it out in out west, and we got that thing in
which we're
North
not
Carolina.
making use of, really.
That's what. Hey, North Carolina.
Yeah, that's
right?
why I got flooded. I know. I saw the headline. I didn't read. Well, I think I did read it.
Lindsey Graham's creepy.
Lots of dead air there. What are we looking for?
I'm looking for this video.
While y'all are looking for that,
just more of a clip.
For me, the two big reasons why is the U.S.'s interests are served by supporting Ukraine. Actually, I'll even give you three. Number one,
I do.
by You got the clip?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay.
Sorry, he'll pause
So
it.
number one, by keeping the war in Ukraine, we ensure that it's not a broader, like NATO is actively at war with an enemy state. So if it stays in Ukraine, it's not a NATO. It's not a real NATO war, which means it's not a real American war. It's just some conflict that's happening overseas that we send money to and bombs and whatever, but we're not really fighting. Our soldiers aren't involved, and it doesn't matter. And,
Okay.
and that sounds hard, but that is a strategic interest for the United States. Number two, and Russia has largely been seen, especially even since the fall of the Soviet Union, but certainly in the Cold War, has been seen as our number one or our number two peer adversary for like war game planning and whatever. Like it's like, hey,
Russia, China.
Russia has the capability to really hurt us bad, and we haven't always had a good relationship with them.
All right.
And so, in my mind, by keeping them engaged in a war that they're not winning, or not winning quickly, every tank they lose, every soldier they lose,
They get a little bit weaker.
Every all the money that they spend cripples them and ensures that they'll never be able to fight us really ever again. So
It's an interesting
to
perspective.
me, that serves a U.S. strategic advantage. I mean, like that's the thing is, it's like, hey, if you wanted to spend U.S. dollars to cripple an enemy of the United States and keep our country safe by crippling an enemy of the United States, what we spend in Ukraine has been a bargain. We have gotten our money back and then some in terms of crippling the Russians. It's been great. It's been a great investment.
Let me challenge
It's a
this.
new perspective for me.
Can I challenge those 2 points?
Sure.
And well, say a couple. Your first point, all right. The fact that keep the war to Ukraine, it doesn't go to NATO, and then it becomes our problem. I'm going to take the Trump approach. What the heck has NATO ever done for us? We have poured billions and billions
Right.
and billions and billions into NATO. All right, and what that does to the common American who's allegedly voting for all this, inflation, man, it hurts their pocketbooks. You go to Kroger, your eggs are $8 as opposed to $2.99. Right?
So
Now, you can't distribute all of that to NATO, but the broader picture is you take, right, it's just say that's 3% of it. You just
your
boom,
point
boom,
is
boom, boom,
that
boom, boom.
government spending in general
right.
leads to inflation.
Your
which hurts us.
your second point, the fundamental assumption there, if it's true, your second point would make sense. Would you agree that
I would,
Russia
wholeheartedly agree
that
with
Russia is the enemy that's going to attack the United States? If that's true, then it makes sense. Why do we think that?
So I've listened to people that are at some of these nice think tanks. They're some of the experts, right? And they are. I think that they're pretty smart, pretty credentialed people. But they even acknowledge, part of the problem with strategic planning, and this is the flaw with my argument, is when you are strategic planning as a country, right? You're like, who doesn't like me, or who has the capabilities to really hurt me, and those are the people you plan against, right? So for the United States, it's like, whether we have, good relations or not with China or Russia, it's like they have capabilities that can really, really hurt us if they wanted to. Now, we have capabilities that can really, really hurt them too, but like that's the thing is we sit there and we just go, well, they have the capability to do us. They haven't always had the kindest intent, and so that's who we plan against. And so it may be kind of like a self-defeating, defeating argument or self-fulfilling prophecy, if you will. But they're manipulating in our elections and all the rest of it. So it's just kind of like,
To take that line of reasoning even further, I think that argument falls apart because anybody has the capability of hurting anyone at any point ever. So constantly building up defense all the time against any perceivable threat that may come up at any point is perhaps a huge waste of resources, especially when you expand outside of United States jurisdiction.
so the problem is like Mexico could hurt us.
Right.
Mexico couldn't conquer us. We'd kick them back across the border in 5 seconds.
Right.
The Russians have the capability of exterminating half the people of the United States in a single salvo.
Yeah, allegedly with the nukes. My point, what I'm trying to get at is the bigger issue is the alleged philosophical differences that we have as to why we would get in arguments, right?
Wait, what?
And why is Russia our enemy? right? It's not just because they have the capability to destroy us.
Oh,
There's
yeah,
g-
no. Yeah,
It's got to
I
be
get what you're
more
saying.
than that. And
Yeah.
those philosophical assumptions have to be questioned, I think, in order to get to the root of the problem.
We haven't really spoken to those philosophical assumptions yet.
Right, that's what I'm trying to get to. Because
before we move
because
on to that-
anybody has the capability. I mean,
Yeah.
I get what Thomas is saying, but also you could say that about literally anything anywhere.
Well, I mean, you're right, but
And-
to his point, and I think this is the point he was about to make. Like the concern would be bigger adversaries. If it's if you're having to ward off a 2-year-old, you can do that quite easily. But if it's another full-grown man, that's a different story. That would be the difference between like Russia, right, and like if the Czech Republic got pissed at us. Like wildly different things. And so I think that's more the point he's trying to make.
Well, and the point I'm trying to make is that would only happen if there's philosophical differences that would cause them to use the alleged capabilities they have against us,
Well,
which
and
you could do in our own infighting. Like you could say the same thing about a civil war in the United States.
Well, we like that's the thing is when it comes to the Russian Federation, we do have philosophical differences. They are an autocratic regime. They do not. I mean, they have elections, but like they don't have freedom. And like there are people in rural Russia that are living basically the same way that they did when they were serfs under the Tsar, 100+ years ago. Like their lives are not dramatically different, and that's how it is.
Well, I mean, are the lives of any of the people in any of the countries we've helped gain their freedom dramatically different? I mean, do you see a bunch of Iraqis wandering around enjoying, nice houses and cable TV? I doubt it.
Well, and that's the thing is it's also, like what do you do with the opportunity that you've been given, right? Like some people have made the most of, hey, we're free and we're democratic now and we can do whatever we want and have made the most of it. And then some people have been like, nah, we're just going to go back to beheading our neighbors because, it's Tuesday and we need to kill somebody.
Right, and I think to that end, like, it's really not our business. It's up to the people. So we get back to the idea of why are we involved in the first place.
My whole challenge is these alleged philosophical differences that we have with, say, Russia or China, this autocratic, imperialist, communist state versus the free democracy of the West, in my opinion, is a kind of 1984 narrative where we're fighting this country. This right now would be Russia, okay? And we're at war with them. They're philosophically opposed to us and how we live life, how we approach rights to the common man. And then, tomorrow it'll be China. It'll just change. And and that hasn't necessarily happened on the scale that it has in 1984, but take the Taliban, for example. All right, the Taliban was mortal enemies number one in like 2001 and 2002.
Right.
And then approximately 2012 to 2014, they become friends when we have to kill ISIS. Does that not seem like a Eurasia,
Oceania,
right, all that? Have you read 1984, Thomas?
No, I have not actually.
I would
You would love it. You should
highly
read it.
recommend it because you could extrapolate that to the bigger picture. Did the Taliban's philosophical worldview change in 10 years, or did their usefulness to the American public and to the interest of who's, pushing these things?
Well, didn't the CIA start
that's
the
the better
Taliban?
point. That's the better point there, Murph, and this has been true throughout the Cold War and it continues to today. The United States government is willing to do business with people that do things that we would never publicly support or acknowledge, and people that we would say, oh, dude, you guys are bad.
Right.
But if they serve a U.S. strategic interest, whatever that interest may be, and you're willing to fight the people that we want you to fight, we can look the other way.
Thomas, let me give you the top two. Can I give you the top two with Russia?
Okay.
Russia's our mortal enemy, right? As we described, they're autocratic, they're terrible, they're imperialistic.
Yeah.
Not that we're not imperialistic. Well, let me tell you what we agree on. You know what's happening right now, allegedly? We're up there in the International Space Station with Russia.
We're besties.
We get along just fine in space. Same thing with the Antarctic Treaty. Russia has been a signatory since the Soviet Union fell in 1991. We're friends in Antarctica. As well as North Korea. They're also a signatory on that treaty. So why can we get along in these interests down there, but we're mortal enemies in a different place? Seems like a little bit of doublethink to me. If they're enemies, shouldn't they be enemies all the time? Or are they enemies to serve a purpose?
Well, I mean, you're talking about two wildly different realms of thought, too. You
No,
expect
I'm
a bunch of scientists to go just, like, shooting each other? You know, what do you want from these people?
But they're still involved in these alleged philosophical differences, which is the only reason we're allegedly involved in this.
Well, the problem with all of that too, though, is that those things are part of, say, like they're part of, like, the United Nations and the rest of it, right? So it is this League of Nations, or this global community, and at least I would think that part of the American thinking is that by being able to engage in constructive ways scientifically in Antarctica or scientifically in space with the ISS, we allow there to be a dialogue in the hopes that even though we may not like your system and the way that you do business, we don't actively want to go out and kill you all, right? Like, our solution to you guys, like, having a different worldview than us is not, as Americans, has not been, we're going to exterminate you from the face of the planet. That's typically not been our approach. But, like, in my mind, that's the point of it, is by being able to collaborate in a scientific capacity for peace and whatever, and the advancement of all mankind or whatever, we might be able to find, when there is a conflict like Ukraine, we can hopefully maybe have a dialogue and try to bring about a resolution.
Here's my guess. It's beneficial for us and Russia to collude when it comes to those two things. It's beneficial for us and Russia probably to have some sort of weird proxy war going on in Ukraine, at least as far as we're concerned. And I think this may be one of the reasons why. John?
Man, it took us a long time to get here, guys.
I'll circle back around.
Lindsay.
I forgot about it.
I don't care.
Look at that Chungus.
But he is one walrus-looking son of a
They can become the best business partner we ever dreamed of. That $10 to $12 trillion of critical mineral assets could be used by Ukraine and the West, not given to Putin and China. This is a very big deal how Ukraine ends. Let's help them win a war we can't afford to lose. Let's find a solution to this war. But they're sitting on a gold mine. To give Putin $10 or $12 trillion of critical minerals that he will share with China is ridiculous.
Thank you, Lindsey Graham.
Ukraine is still standing. This war is about money. People don't talk much about it. But you know the richest country in all of Europe for rare earth minerals is Ukraine. $2 to $7 trillion worth of minerals that are rare earth minerals, very relevant to the 21st century. Ukraine's ready to do a deal with
that picture of Biden.
Not the Russians. So it's in our interest to make sure that Russia doesn't take over the place. They can become the best business.
Those are some amazing photos of Biden.
Yeah,
Hey, quick initial breakdown of that. There's 12 trillion, then it became 2 to 7 trillion. Somebody stole. Somebody stole something in that 6 months.
So what are the odds he has like a 27-year-old?
Also, how do you estimate an element that's in the earth that you don't actually have in your hand?
Oh, you can't. But point is,
Thomas, that's what depletion accounting's for, man.
Dude, I didn't pass that.
They've all wrapped that up in FASB and GAP.
our beloved
They
senator,
don't do FASB or GAP over there. It's IFRS, man.
Of course, IFRS.
our beloved senator seems to be of the opinion where they're sitting on a gold mine, and that's why we're at war.
First of all, he's from South Carolina. Okay, he's not
Right.
our beloved
Tennessee's
senator.
beloved.
I meant just as
And
a
I'm an
nation.
Yeah, he's not my senator either.
Yeah, you live in freaking Oklahoma. What's going on in the state of Oklahoma?
My guys are Jimmy Langford and Mark Wayne Mullen.
That's
he
a
wanted
terrible
to fight
last name.
somebody in the halls of Congress. It made me. I didn't know how I felt about that. It was
Who do we
kinda
got? We got Marsha.
fun.
Bill
And,
Haggerty.
I don't
Bill
know.
Haggerty.
Who even know? Who gives a crap about
That sounds like a guy from a John Wayne movie.
I wanted
though,
Hank
Bill
Williams to
Haggerty.
run. He was talked about it. Man.
Y'all may laugh at me.
The artist?
I miss Bob Corker and Lamar Alexander.
I don't even know who those people are.
Tennessee used to have senators that meant something, and Marcia and Bill Haggerty are just a sad shadow of the dream team of Lamar Alexander and Bob Corker, in my opinion.
All right.
That may be that's totally irrelevant to our discussion. But
I've not paid any attention to local politics in Tennessee, probably ever, with the exception of old Andy Ogles, who was the mayor of Murray County for a little while, who everybody else hated, but I'm kind of a big fan of. So
no comment.
he kept Murray County open
He
when
took
everything was shutting down.
he took Desjardins' spot.
No, that was.
No, he didn't. He took a newly created district spot.
Oh.
Desjardins still there. It was.
Is he still in Congress?
Yeah, I'm
Hey,
pretty sure.
hey,
wow.
Scott Desjardins, if you're listening to this, you're a scumbag piece of crap. You're a
Alright.
lying, abortion-supporting piece of crap,
Well, there you go.
and you do not represent this state at all.
Moving on.
I hate Scott Desjardins.
Yeah,
I
he's
see
not-
that. I don't even know who that
I
is.
thought that he got booted out.
I did too.
Let me double check.
He is a living sack
I'm pretty
of
sure he's still
turds.
there.
Yeah, he was.
And
Walking
you know
bag
what
of
he
ball
does?
skin,
You
as
know what
they
he does
say?
for breakfast? He sucks on frozen turds. I hate Scott
I need
Desjardins.
to pee. Y'all talk.
Thomas, that's one thing we can agree on.
Oh,
He is a piece of garbage.
He sold sold Tennesseans a bill of goods and then
Yeah, he's still there.
was something different.
I
Oh,
can't
is he?
believe. I
Yeah.
thought he was gone.
Well,
I thought he
we were
got
redistrict, and they created a new 5th district out of us in Nashville, to
Gotcha.
kick out one of the Democratic representatives who was retiring.
Dude,
that's how Andy
I
got
love
his spot.
gerrymandering, man.
I-
That's
alright.
awesome.
what I'm gonna do, Thomas, and
Yeah.
we have this AI editing tool
Okay.
called Opus Clip, and it generates shorts.
Uh-huh.
We're gonna generate one. We're gonna have a Scott Desjardins short, and I'm gonna spam his Twitter feed. I'm gonna send it to a couple ladies I know who are in government, and I'm gonna see if we can get it to him. Okay?
Oh, you want him to see this?
I hate him. So, Carson, are you done peeing? What were we talking about? My blood boils talking about Scott Desjardins.
Ooh. Well. Oh, and my third point.
Oh
point
yeah, you
with
never got to
Ukraine.
your third point.
Yeah, I didn't get there. My third point with Ukraine was I said, it's good to keep the war in Ukraine. We're getting best use of. Oh, the third thing, most of the money, the overwhelming majority of the money that we have spent for Ukraine, has been on American defense industrial facilities. We've expanded, artillery shell making facilities at our depots. So basically it's like, we spent $60 billion on Ukraine, and that's cash that the Ukrainians got in their pockets. Like $12 billion of that actually ever left the United States.
Well, first of all, that's $12 billion too much. Second of all, in this Keynesian economy, like I get the idea that spending trickles down and benefits. I mean, I kind of get that argument, but who does it benefit the most? All right,
we are benefiting the most. Make no mistake.
We is a massively broad term.
We as the United
right.
States. The United States.
Now, I'll agree with that, but you can break that down into 100 different things. Take all right, the ammo shells.
Yeah.
Right. How much billions did they get? How would you just say?
I don't know.
Right,
I don't know how much they spend.
let's
on that,
just-
but they have allocated millions,
All right,
if not billions of dollars.
let's who benefits most from Ammo Shell Incorporated making a ton of ammo shells for the Ukraine? Okay, it would be
Whoever has
number
a
one.
controlling interest in that
That's
business.
number one. The shareholders of Ammo Shell Incorporated, which are most likely
Senators.
key positions
So-
in the United States Congress, key positions in the Department of Defense,
So the problem with
CEOs of Boeing, CEOs of high up officials. They
BlackRock.
benefit the most.
it depends on which munitions you're talking about. So if you're talking about missiles, yeah, that's old Raytheon, or maybe Lockheed Martin or whatever. We haven't given them a ton of that. I mean, the HIMARS, I guess, but when we're talking about artillery shells, which is kind of what they need the most of, because I don't know that we necessarily want to go down this rabbit hole, but they're an artillery-based army. Their army is designed to fight on the ground and use artillery as their primary fires support, whereas our military is designed to use aircraft and bombers and bombs, not artillery. I mean, we have artillery, but that's not our main end-all be-all. In the United States, artillery shells are built at U.S. Army depots. Now, somebody has a contract to manage
Right.
that depot, but it's kind of like you get paid X dollars to run this factory that the government owns and built and maintains.
Right. Let me.
Sounds awfully communist to me.
The whole point. It's not artillery shells. I mean, you could place artillery shells with smart computers for
Sure.
fighter jets.
Yeah.
The product isn't the point. The point is who benefits from these large spending contracts. It's the people that use the money first. The people that use the money first are in control of these huge corporations, and they have the benefit. This is how the rich get richer. is they have the ability to use new money before the purchasing power is diluted.
By the rest of that money entering into the economy.
Exactly.
Yeah, the best way to describe it is it's a wealth transfer, right?
Yeah.
So it's like when the government is spending money, they're not like they're taking it. They are taking it from people. They're not producing something to earn that money. They are forcefully taking it from you from the threat of violence and handing it to somebody else. And when they're printing it, they are just forcefully taking it from the future.
That was.
I
I understand your point. I don't
So,
think that was the best
well,
analogy.
My point
But-
is there's no production in the creation of this money. It is taken by theft. So it's like it's a net negative.
I'm just saying.
And the middle class are the people who are paying for
I'm
it.
just saying when Thomas is saying we, meaning the U.S., that's very broad. That's all I'm trying to say.
Oh yeah, I was about to say it's a broad answer.
Because I don't necessarily feel a part of that. I don't feel like I have benefited at all from the war in Ukraine.
Well,
now,
that's-
somebody who has these shares in XYZ company that makes these shells, perhaps their dividends have gone up, perhaps their stock portfolios have gone up, perhaps their retirement has gone up as a nature of this war, and they would say, hey, this is a benefit because I chose to invest in XYZ company.
See, my deal is the benefit is not purely economic. The benefit in my mind is that there's not a broader war. Like, that's the benefit to me.
And that, to me, is what I would say, perhaps that's not true. That gets into the philosophical.
Well,
that's an unanswerable question.
yeah.
And also
no,
you need to
yeah.
take the argument as like, how is this not going to create a broader war if you have two, in their paradigm is two nuclear powers engaging in a proxy war with each other.
Right.
What happens if, maybe at some point Putin gets desperate and is like, do you want a desperate man with a load of nukes, going, and destroy the world?
Yeah.
So it's like the idea that it's preventing a broader war may not be completely true in the end.
And that's the main concern of a lot of your, big name people who speak in the media is, oh my gosh, we don't need to have, some kind of nuclear war that destroys the world. No part of me thinks that's going to happen. I don't think anybody is retarded enough to try to blow anything up. Murph doesn't even think nukes exist. So I don't think anybody in this room is that worried about that happening. Maybe Thomas, I don't know. We'll have to ask him about that.
Yeah,
but
not overly.
at the end of the day, like it's yeah.
And it just doesn't square with their narrative. If your idea is that Putin is this crazy maniac who wants to expand the Russian Empire, well, if he loses in Ukraine and he's at the point where it's like, hey, I might lose my power and I have all these nukes, what do I got to lose?
Right.
So it doesn't fit the narrative in my opinion.
And
Well,
that doesn't seem to be the case.
So part of that has been the U.S. has engaged heavily in what they call escalation management, and honestly, the whole thing is. It's all kind of. It's a dude on a unicycle on a high wire, juggling crap in the middle of the air, trying to manage it. Because it's like we've already said, it's an unknowable problem, right? You can't know what's gonna be the red line, but the U.S. has been very conscientious of like, hey, we're only willing to give you this, and because if we give you, we'll give you HIMARS, but you can't use it against Russians in Russian territory. You can only use it against Russian targets in Ukraine. And then, then all of a sudden it's like, well, and that was a big red line for Putin. And then we gave it to him and they used it and Putin didn't do anything. And then so now that they have HIMARS, it's like, well, now we'll give you the HIMARS missiles and you can use them against
So that's
Russian
what a HIMARS
military
is. It's a missile.
targets. Yeah, it's a missile.
I didn't know what that was.
You can use a HIMARS system against a Russian military target in Ukraine. And so, that's the thing is there has been a progressive series of the Russians are like, this is a red line. If you cross it, there's going to be consequences.
Right.
And then every time they've said that and we crossed it, there are no consequences.
So,
but part of that is that the Russians are using that as a calculus of, if we tell the United States it's a red line, they'll take us seriously because they really don't want to have a nuclear war. They won't give this capability. And, we can cope with it, but, it's going to be inconvenient if they can shoot long-range missiles against military targets and depots and staging areas inside Russian territory. That would be inconvenient for us when we're trying to marshal our stuff to then go march into Ukraine. So we're going to say it's a red line, and if they don't give us that that capability, we're going to hope that we can, marshal our stuff in Russia, march across the border, and take over Ukraine in 5 days. And then that didn't happen.
So, two things. A, didn't Trump claim he was going to end the war in Ukraine
He can.
before the election started? Didn't he say that was going to happen?
Yeah,
Is
and
that-
I have already been over
we're-
500 times how he will do that, and it makes a lot of sense. What-
How is he going to do that?
Let
I'm
me-
serious. I don't know.
Let me explain it to you, Thomas.
Because I see tons of problems
Who-
with any solution being
who-
happening in the war.
Can have the most leverage over Putin, okay? All right, you get leverage over Putin by going after what he holds dear.
Mm.
What does Putin hold dear? His wife and his daughters.
We're
Trump?
We're gonna
What is
kidnap
Trump?
and hold them hostage.
I didn't
or
say that.
target? Huh?
I didn't say anything about they.
He's not married though. Not officially.
I don't know if he is anymore. He definitely has been. He has at least 2 daughters.
Yeah, I was about to say he has been married in the past.
One of them's
he was-
hot.
He was having a secret affair or whatever with
So-
some Russian tennis player.
Yeah, so what is Trump good
So-
at, though?
He's going to target
Getting
his family.
women with their consent to go with him
Wherever he wants to go.
Right, and engage with the mushroom, as Stormy says. This is how Trump will end the war. He will be like, Putin, if you do not end this war, I will have relations with your ex-wife. I will have relations with your daughter. There will be nothing you can do about it. Both of your daughters are still of childbearing age. If you will either end this war or live to see little Trumps come out of your daughter.
Who peddled that theory?
Murph.
Robert Taylor Murphy.
Murphy!
This is the leverage that Trump has. Who else has that leverage over Putin? Who else could have the balls and the ability to back it up to go after what Putin loves the most?
He's got a big penis. It's a large penis. It's a great penis.
Now,
He's going to show them his
what's
penis.
the problem?
It's going to be wonderful.
Thomas, approach it logically. You know Trump has that power. You know
I know that that's something that Trump would probably say on national television.
exactly,
yes.
which is wonderful and hilarious. This is Trump's grand
It's
strategy.
beautiful in a way.
It alarms me, but yes, I could see Trump saying that.
Right. That's a way to bypass all this trillions of dollars in defense infrastructure, go straight to the heart of the issue, and take control.
Well, so here's my problem is
That's a great way to take control. I love it.
So here's my problem. Everybody wants a negotiated end to the conflict in Ukraine, and let's be honest, like everybody should want that. That'd be great. The problem is I'm too realistic to see that as an option. The problem is what the Russians want is if they can't have all of Ukrainian territory, or at least the parts of it that they want, the Donbass, the Crimea, if they can't have the pieces that they want, and what they want is they want certain pieces, if not all of Ukraine, and then whatever's left of Ukraine, they want to be a puppet vassal state, much like Belarus. They do not want an independent Ukraine. They want a Ukraine like they had in 2014 that was more or less a vassal of Moscow. The problem is that as long as Ukraine is allowed to exist as an independent nation, that will not happen. They have, after this conflict, Ukraine has, as long as Ukraine exists, they will be independent of Moscow, and that's assured at this point. So that's what Putin wants out of the deal. And anything short of that, he's just going to use his time to rearm and prepare for the next conquest when he comes back to finish the job that he didn't finish this time. Ukraine wants all their territory back. Well, the problem for Ukraine is they don't really have the manpower or the weapons to take it back. Russia, I don't think, is in any kind of condition where they have any interest in giving it back. And NATO is not going to come in and march in and liberate Ukraine for the Ukrainians. That's not happening, barring some other escalation.
Well, and you also get the problem, Eastern Ukraine is ethnically Russia and wants to be a part of Russia.
So
That's what I keep hearing.
Some of them do, a lot of them do not.
Well, it's like according to at least their elections and before, I guess that was before the coup of the Yanukovych government in 2014, is like they voted in Crimea and the Donbass region to be a part of it.
Well, and here's part of the problem there.
Well, so
is
that's
you're gonna
the
hear-
Russian playbook, though.
Here's part of the problem there is you're going to hear, none of us have any direct evidence of that being the case or not. And you're going to hear, there's obviously such a massive incentive for people of a certain political leaning, I don't know why, to be really excited about this war in the Ukraine. Why? I don't know. Also, it does seem to span. I don't know. There are a lot of liberals who are real. I stand with Ukraine, right? There are some conservatives, but
I'm
fewer.
I'm just going to say.
And hold on.
Okay. I'll let you
So
finish your point.
there's obviously a massive incentive for people to say, like, those people don't want to be a part of Russia. For the people who are on the other side of that coin, right, who are suggesting that maybe we don't need to be there, there's large incentive to be like, no, they've obviously wanted to be a part of Russia. Just let Russia take over, that particular area. And so there's no way to have any clear knowledge of what the hell is actually going on unless you've been there. There's no way to know.
That's when I start evaluating the ethos of, the military-industrial complex and the, people pushing, the other side of that. And that's where I think the ethos argument comes in. Is like, these people aren't good people. So it's like,
but I don't know of any good people that are in a political position to be able to share information about the Ukraine, much less do anything about the war there. I can't think of any. Vivek, maybe. That's about it.
I mean, nobody really.
And then I'm going to finish my argument about why I don't think a negotiated peace is possible. But, if the United States and or a European coalition got together and said, well, we're done. We're going to force you guys to all sit down at the table and come to an agreement. We've already done that twice. There are 2 Minsk agreements about all of this. And we did one in 2014, which hasn't been honored. We did one in 1991 when Ukraine was established after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and its borders were accepted and acknowledged and signed off by all nations, including the Russian Federation. We've done this before. We've had multiple agreements. The Russians haven't honored them. Why are they going to honor the next one?
Because Trump will take your wife, he'll take your daughters if you don't.
That seems like a reasonable
We are
thought process
playing
to me.
hardball now. Okay,
Yeah.
forget these billions of dollars. Forget these minerals.
And I was
We're
about to say,
coming for you.
And that even assumes that
Gonna grab her in the pussy.
that the Ukrainians would agree to it in the first place. I mean, and that's the problem. Is my big thing is you're a big fan of we should stay out of everybody else's business. The negotiations for the end of the war, not our business. I mean, if you guys want to fly over to Washington and have a meeting, we'll have brunch on the White House lawn and y'all sign a paper and it'll look great on TV. But, that's the extent of American involvement in a negotiated peace, in my opinion. That's what it ought to be.
I can agree with you there. It's not our business.
Yeah.
Let them, let them fix their own problems, and especially let them figure out what the hell they want to do after the war is over. That's not up to us. That's up to the people who are actually dealing with it all.
And that's the conversation. If I was president of the United States, the conversation I would have with old freaking guy in Kyiv. What's his name?
Zelensky.
Yeah, old Vlad Zelensky.
Alex Jones?
Yeah, I don't know why that was so hard for me to come up with. Is I'd say, hey man, like you, love you, support you, but you need to understand, Congress is only going to give you so many blank checks, if you will. So y'all need to figure out what you're trying to do here. Come up with some terms that you can agree to. We're going to support you as long as we can, but you need to understand, you don't have a bottomless check and the money will run out.
I don't know, man. They seem pretty happy to give them money thus far. I've just, within the past maybe month, heard mutterings of people being a little bit less willing to hand over large sums of money.
When they signed that last $60 billion deal, it was hotly contested, especially in the House. Republicans are not a fan of continued aid to Ukraine.
Yeah, here's another finish your point first.
They're not a fan of continued aid, and the bills that they've been signing for Ukraine aid have been increasingly have been shrinking in size. And so it's one of those things where it's hey bud, you need to figure something out and either be able to fight this war on your own or whatever, but the American people are not gonna support you indefinitely.
Yeah.
And especially with the Democrats have been far more willing to push Ukraine support than the Republicans have.
Which why is that? Does anybody have any insight as to why that is? Because that seems weird to me.
I have no idea. It makes zero sense to me because
it's become a badge of honor.
I
fly a Ukraine flag. I'm a better person than you. Okay.
I have no idea why that is what it is, but
I can come
It's
up with
so
two.
weird.
I can come up with two ideas. All right, number one, the alleged alliance that exists between Putin and Trump, right? They're buds. Russia interferes, and Russia is the reason Trump won because of Russian bots and disinformation, and they hate Trump. Okay, so that could be one reason why they support Ukraine is a fringe spiderweb of Trump derangement syndrome. Number two, Democrat, and this makes a little more
Logical sense.
Well, I stand by number one, but this is a little more concrete. Okay, like Democrats want the government to legislate their generosity. So as opposed to going out and giving somebody money, being a good person, they'll be like, "Hey, I voted for this Democrat who's going to force that to happen, and I am therefore moral."
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good point.
That's what the Democrats do, and probably a huge aspect of supporting Ukraine.
Yeah,
that was well said. That made a lot of sense.
Some kind of virtue signaling moral nonsense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to actually do anything. I'd like my government to make me do it.
But I talk about it on Facebook, and therefore I've done it.
And the other thing that I would say, this isn't a universal Republican trait per se, but it's definitely a key element of Trump's MAGA ideology. It's not so much just make America great. It's if you're not American, screw you and the horse you rode in on. We don't care about you and your problems. That's just, I just feel like that's baked in. So if you're if you're a Republican, you're not necessarily a part of the MAGA camp. But if you're a part of the MAGA camp, then you're definitely on board with, I'm not giving my money to other people, to foreigners, period.
Well, I mean,
even if they are exception to that, but we don't have to talk about that.
There is one exception.
What I wanted to say
Israel,
before we move on is just that the only way that what y'all were talking about is like people of them sitting down and figuring out their problems to end it is the money's got to stop. The money that the United States are flowing into the Ukraine, it has to stop, because as long as you're pumping money into it, it's going to prolong it longer and longer and longer. And it's a war that, quite frankly, it can't be won on the Ukrainian side. So the money has to stop before you get anywhere.
Well, see, part of the problem with that too, though, John, is it won't just end because the money stops. Because that's the thing. If the Russians can win, they're not going to go negotiate. And that's kind of the problem for the Russians. They've paid the price of a major war. They have as many casualties as the United States had in the Civil War.
That's a strange comparison.
I will also say, allegedly, you can't ever believe any of that in war because all of it's propagandized on both sides. So just caveat that.
Well, I mean, they've had hundreds of thousands of casualties.
The Russians have?
Oh yeah,
from the Ukraine war,
hundreds of thousands of casualties. Like they have as many casualties in a week over the last month that as we've had in Afghanistan and Ukraine in 20 years of fighting. That's how they fight wars.
How do we know that?
They have a lot of people, so I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense.
That's my point. Is
part of the way they count that is they go.
Who is they?
People that are looking at third party, different think
the
tanks.
Royal
and the rest
they.
of it. Different think tanks and people that study that kind of stuff. But one of the ways that they count it is they go and see records from the Russian Federation and see who they're paying pensions to for dying in a war.
That's so morbid.
Counting that.
Jeez, that's depressing.
My point is, you won't ever know that.
Well, I mean, there's
until
no way
after
to know.
it's over, and you can actually kind of evaluate excess death.
And even
both sides probably is not accurate in any way, shape, or form.
Right,
and even then, it's always an estimate.
Yeah, and you have to at some point you have to accept some sort of figure if you're going to talk about it.
Well, there's
only so much you can do there.
This is a little bit of a red herring, but let me vehemently protect Thomas here. There's one that's not an estimate. And if you say it's an estimate, you'll get your balls chopped off. There's one that was 100% a 6 with several zeros after it. And if you question that in any way, you're in trouble. That's the only one that's not an estimate. I'm just trying to save you. All right, moving on.
Well, yeah, but that wasn't as a result of the war.
Carson? It was not 6,000,001. It was not 5,999,999.
I'm not arguing
6 million of them died.
I'm not arguing that
point. If you question that,
I'm just
you
saying
are a terrorist.
It was not.
You are anti-Semitic.
It was not as a result of the war. That's all I'm saying.
Well, and I say all that to say is the Russians have paid a heavy price all the way around the board, economically, militarily, in terms of people. If they can think that they can win and they don't have to negotiate anything, they will finish the fight and win.
Well, yeah, that'd be true for anybody. That's just a reasonable
Yeah.
thought process. That's just logic.
Well, I mean, and so that's kind of inherently the problem. Is it's like, well, if the Ukrainians stop fighting, the Russians are going to realize, hey, they're out of ammo. We're just going to keep fighting and we're going to go.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is the Ukrainians already know this. They're in a fight for their existence, their right to exist. And so it's kind of like we can fight to the death against the Russians, or we can surrender and they'll round us up and put us in camps and kill us all off anyway.
Why can't we all just leave each other alone? Why does everybody have to be
That's never going to happen.
Why can't that happen?
Look,
That's all I want out of life.
We've been ranting about Ukraine war for forever.
Yeah.
I want to kind of.
This has been a great discussion, you guys.
I want to kind of pose the question. I want to hear Thomas's opinion on this as we
Alright.
kind of wrap this thing down. What do you think? So we, all right, since World War II, 1945, United States has been at odds with Russia. Soviet Union, right? It probably died down a little bit in the 90s, but basically once Putin became the new Stalin, then it's been basically back to where it was.
Right.
What is going to be the final domino to fall? When is it ever going to be direct conflict United States versus Russia? When is that going to happen, and what's going to cause that to happen? Because we've been in a Cold War for freaking 80 years.
See, that's the thing is,
True.
I think it's impossible to know what would cause that, because part of the thing it existed during the Cold War, this ideology called MAD, mutually assured destruction.
Right.
It continues to exist today, and that's the problem. Is it's insane for the Russians to attack the Americans because we'll launch a bunch of nukes and we'll kill you all. And conversely, it's insane for the Americans to attack the Russians. They'll launch a bunch of nukes and kill us all. So we'll all just hate each other, sit down, go drink a cup of coffee, and get on with our effing lives. Because that's that was the kind of the thought process we lived with during the Cold War. It's like, we hate you all, but we're not going to kill you because you'll kill all of us, and vice versa.
That was such a beautiful picture you just painted.
I mean, that's what, and that's we still live with that today. The Russians, don't want to fight with NATO and the United States because we have what's called the U.S. has, not NATO per se, but the U.S. has, is capable of achieving a strategic deterrence with our conventional forces. And so typically to achieve a strategic deterrence, you have to have nuclear weapons. And so it's like, hey, if
Certainly
by
follows.
having nuclear weapons, we will destroy your people and topple your government, blah, 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 because we're going to use nuclear weapons, and that's our strategic deterrence. Well, the United States, with our conventional forces, and we've demonstrated in Iraq twice, in Afghanistan, and elsewhere, we can send our conventional forces, and we can totally obliterate your military and your defense capabilities, and then we'll take you over. And so our conventional forces have a strategic type deterrence.
All right, so yeah, you saying all that, Thomas. Number one, you said at the beginning that Russian is this imperialistic expansionist. How is what you just said not describe the U.S. as an imperialist expansionist?
So,
And two, just real quick,
Yeah.
before you answer that, United States is allegedly the only country to have ever used the nukes.
yes.
it's also true.
Well,
So it's a huge time double standard.
Well, that's
We got to be worried about Putin using the nukes, but we're the only one that's ever done it.
Yeah, and we'll move on to answer that. I always thought that was weird back when we were younger and like the Iraq War was going on, and everybody was pissed that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction.
That was
All I
not-
could think of was like,
It's not true, by the way.
well, whatever. Everybody was pissed that he allegedly had them, and I was like, well, don't raise my. Don't we have those? Why are we? Don't we have them? Why are we pissed that other people have them? What's going on here?
And because in theory in our country, no one person pushes that button.
Right. We'll use them responsibly, but they
Yeah.
won't. It's a retarded argument, in my opinion.
Um,
Sorry. Anyway,
but-
go ahead.
Oh. All right. Remind me of the specific question I need to
So
answer.
in the beginning, you were like, "Hey, the reason Russia is such a problem is they're an autocratic expansionist empire."
Yeah.
But here is the United States
Why are they bad and imperialistic?
essentially
and why are we not?
doing the exact
Yeah.
same thing, maybe not in name, but in practice. Hey, we topple Saddam. We've got pro-West backed government in Iraq. Hey, we topple Gaddafi on September 11th, 2012. We now have pro-West backed government in Libya. Hey,
Not
we
really, but
we
yeah.
attempted to do the same thing with freaking what's his name in Syria? What's the guy's name in Syria?
Bashar al-Assad.
Yeah, but that failed, but now he's out of there and he's allegedly fled to Russia.
Yeah.
You know,
So the
to go
problem
down the
is
list, the last bastion is Iran.
The
But
problem is that we, first off, Libya, we never really came close to having anything close to a pro. There may have been pro-America elements that we worked with, but we never had a pro-America government in Libya or Syria. In Syria we have the Kurds. They're kind of just like this ethnic area, and in their world, ideally they would just have this territory of they'd probably call it Kurdistan or something, and that'd just be their little thing, and they'd just be their own little independent country. Well, that's not popular with the Turks, and that's not popular with the rest of Syria. That's not popular with people in Iraq, who they neighbor, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't matter. The thing is, it's hard for me to articulate. What I would fall back on is our track record during the Cold War, because especially and at the end of World War II, we would not risk a single ounce of American blood or spend a single asset to save or protect the British or the French empires. We would not spend any resources to help them protect or preserve or reconquer their colonial possessions unless it served an American strategic interest in ending the World War II. We wouldn't do any of that. And even after the war, the French and the British are involved in the Suez Crisis, and Egypt is an independent country, and what does that mean, and this and that and whatever. The U.S. came out and said, hey, Britain, France, this is an independent country. They get to call their own shots. We don't necessarily like it, but, you can't go out here and just invade them and do whatever you want. That's not how this works. And so our strategy, like as Americans, has always been more economic. We're just going to buy your friendship. That's been the way we approach it. Is you don't have to do business with us, but if you don't do business with us, we're going to cut you out of the market, and then we're going to, that kind of deal. But if you do business with us, we'll pay you a bunch of cash, and that's how it works.
that kind of sounds like the mob
Well,
taking
I mean,
over the neighborhood.
Sounds very mobby. Yeah,
It's not
does.
it's not necessarily like, we're going to come after you, but it's like, we're not going to protect you either. Because that's been the biggest part of our deal post World War II, is that globalism has been a tool of American foreign policy to fight the Soviets. We established freedom of the seas and said, hey, we'll secure the commerce lanes. You can engage on the global stage. You can do business with whoever you want to do business with, and we'll protect the seas. You just have to sign up and agree to, to fight against the communists with us. And, for a little country like New Zealand that could never hope to protect the sea lanes to their country, they're like, sure, sounds great. They signed right up.
So we're protecting all of the Pacific Ocean now? Is that what you're telling me? Just to keep New Zealand safe?
Loosely.
That seems a little insane.
Yeah, again, I go back to, protecting New Zealand. Why is that the common man's problem, right? The reason the U.S. gets involved and there's an economic interest for the U.S. is because the leaders of the U.S. are putting money and power into their own pocket, and the commoner who has no ability to influence anything in the Pacific lanes of New Zealand are having to pay for that. Right?
That would be my question, is how much of the public interest in the Ukraine war or the Iraq war, for that matter, World War II, was a result of just government propaganda, getting us all riled up and into these wars, and how much of it is a result of the actual rational self-interest of the people.
Yeah, Carson.
And I would have a hard time imagining, that it's mostly the I doubt it.
Hey, you're that whole thing there gets to a question that sums it up that I want to ask Thomas for the listeners to consider. What is the difference or should the United States interest and the interest of you and I overlap? Are those two things the same thing?
It's an interesting topic.
Well, the problem with that inherently is that the United States is a conglomeration of 300 something million people, like 340 million people, 350 million people.
It's somewhere around there. It's
It's
somewhere north of
impossible.
330.
It's impossible for the state, the federal government, to perfectly align with every citizen on every issue all the time. There will always have to be a compromise. The government will never perfectly represent you or your interests. It's impossible. But the idea is that the government should represent and identify with the majority of people on the various issues, right? So
That's why this DEI nonsense is crazy.
So here's the thing with that, Thomas. And you're right. You're 100% right. With a country of 350 million people, you're never going to have the federal government speaking in any kind of way to probably, even at this point, majority represent your interest. The problem is the centralization, dude. Which one would you say better represents the interest of the people of Tennessee? The United States government or the state of Tennessee? Which one do you think better represents the interest of the people of Murray County, the state of Tennessee or the county commissioners of Murray County, right? It gets more.
What's your point? I don't think anybody's going to disagree with you about that, but what's your point?
The point is the centralization of federal power in and of itself is an issue. It's the whole point of the Constitution. It's the whole point of the checks and balances that we were supposed to have. This thing has gotten too centralized.
it depends on what you're doing with it, though, because what's possible to happen is you have a situation like Europe where the governments of the various nations represent those nations well. But then you have, a country like France or Germany, heavily industrialized, high standard of living. Then you have a country like, Greece, which represents their people, but very low standard of living, lots of poverty, lots of problems.
How do we know they represent their people well? That'd be my first question there.
Well,
What makes you say
I'm
that?
just presuming that the government of Greece is a better representative of the people of Greece than the European Parliament is.
Oh, okay, that's the point. Okay,
That-
all right,
that's
I'm
my
with you.
point. Yeah,
I'm with
that's
you.
my
Okay.
point.
Yeah,
But- and
he's
so
equating.
that's the thing is, the point Murphy's making is like, well, do our state governments better represent us, or does the federal government? Well, the state governments better represent us
Right.
and what we want and our views and whatever. But like, the point of the centralization of that power at the federal level is to ensure that, at least in this country, is to help raise standards so that everybody has a minimum floor, because and to try to keep the gap less, right? Because like, people in Texas probably on average enjoy a higher standard of living than people in Mississippi.
Yeah,
But the idea,
I'm sure they do.
The idea is to keep, the difference between people in Mississippi and the difference in people in Texas to be small, as opposed to like the difference between people who live in France and people who live in Germany, as opposed to people who live in France and people who live in, like North Africa.
Right.
Like, there's a big difference in living in France and living in North Africa.
It's true.
North Africa.
Can't argue with you there.
North Africa's not too bad. Central Africa is bad.
Well, or Central, whatever country you
Pick
want.
your favorite country.
My point is to keep the gap less.
There's something. I mean, and that makes sense, and it's a nice idea. There's something about that it's my big problem with that is
Well, the
it's
problem is
compulsory socialism.
The problem is how that power is wielded.
Well, that
and that's
too.
always been
That's
always
another
been the
problem.
problem with governance. Autocracy, or having a monarch, isn't a problem if you have a good monarch who's reasonable and fair and just and is promoting the interest of the people and is providing for their defense and is growing the economy and the rest of it. The problem is when you have a monarch who's not doing that, it's
Right.
not a very good system.
And
And when he
that's-
decides that you're
yeah.
the problem because you spoke out about it,
Right.
then it's a real big problem.
So that begs the question: has our monarch, has the deep state, gotten to be too problematic to be good anymore? Because I think we can agree, like the heads of all of these three-letter organizations, right? These people who aren't elected but hold jobs in Washington for decades, right? the people who are probably really running this country, because, I mean, that walking bag of ball skin of a president isn't doing jack okay?
Carson, he signed 50 bills in one
He
night.
signed 50 bills.
He read 17,000 pages.
He's doing a lot.
Joe
Carson.
Biden read 17,000 pages in 8 hours.
He's a busy boy. He's got those.
Oh,
he's got
boy.
those cool sunglasses on all the time.
Yeah.
Which, why does he have those on? Anyway, like, is it getting to be too problematic? Is the monarch bad at this point? Have we reached the point where the fish is starting to stink from the head down, so to speak?
First off, I love the Russian proverb there. I love that.
That's what I'm here for.
It's
Bring us full circle.
I love that. I learned that when I read a biography on Stalin in high school, I think, or junior high. I don't remember.
You were a fun teenager, weren't
that
you?
was the only thing I remember from that book is the fish rots from the head down. I was like, great line. I think that all things in life go in cycles. There are times when things are better. There are times when things are worse. I don't think I choose to believe that we're all moral free agents. We all have the right of choice. That's the first lesson in our fifth grade curriculum at West 7th State.
Nice. I would tend to agree with you there. Sure.
And so there's always the option and the ability to choose to be better, choose to do better, and to end up, in a better place. The government can always choose to do things better. And a lot of people believe that because Donald Trump has been elected, God is going to bless America again and everything is going to be sunshine and roses and rainbows.
Right.
I don't subscribe to that, but
I would love to believe that. I would love to.
I would love to be wrong, and I'd love for it to be true.
Yeah.
But that's the thing is, people get all worked up and bent out of shape about it. Stuff goes in cycles. What has been before, and what is will be again. Like, that's just what it is. And I choose not to be, depressed or distracted or whatever about it. It's like the world in which we live is the world in which we live. I'll do what I can to change it, but I'm not the president of the United States. I don't set foreign policy. I don't do any of that stuff. I'm not in Congress. I don't write bills.
You should run for Congress. I'd vote for you.
Yeah, the problem is I'll say something and nobody else will. That's kind of how that works,
That's true. Well, that's another issue with the political system on the whole.
And that's the other thing is, if you're unhappy with the people that are representing you, hold them accountable for it. Like, if you don't like that there are people in Congress that don't know the first thing about the Constitution of the United States, and they represent you, maybe call them out on it.
I mean,
maybe vote them out of office. Maybe vote for a challenger in the primary.
That's a good idea, but that's also dangerous.
Hey.
Like, people who with the Clintons, guess what happens to them? They die.
Well, the Clintons are old and not in charge anymore.
Well, point being, though, like, you start narrowing your sights on some of these big-name government officials, good luck making it through the next week. It might not happen.
Well, and the funny thing about all that, too, though, is the people that you and I probably view as the problems, you know who they don't represent?
The people.
Us.
Yeah, right, exactly.
They don't represent us. They're not our congressmen.
You're completely right there.
But that's the thing is, if you ask the people that are voting for them into office, they're going to say, well, who's the problem? They're going to say, well, the people that we're, the jackass that we're voting for. That's who they're going to say is the problem.
I don't know that anybody is backing Bill at this point. Who is backing Bill Clinton these days?
Nobody.
Well, he's old and can't run anymore.
That's true.
Thomas said something so good. Okay, if you don't like who's in office or what they're doing, if they don't represent you, hold them accountable, right? To steal, man, what you said. I wanted to find that, and I want to hear what y'all think about my definition of holding them accountable. John, if you will go to Google. If you will pull up Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence, please.
Oh, jeez.
And
this is getting serious.
We're
reading.
Let us read the Declaration of Independence.
Oh, boy.
And I would like to show you the definition of holding them accountable.
All right.
Pull it up.
The tree of patriots must be refreshed with tyrants and patriots or something.
Right, no, go up. All right. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, love, liberty, and happiness, blah, blah, blah. All right, here is the definition of holding them accountable. That to secure these rights, Governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter, key word here, or abolish it. That's the definition of holding them accountable. Revolution.
Or alter. I like
Alter was in there as well.
We've
Let's be
tried
honest.
altering. We've been trying altering for years upon years upon
Who
years.
though? Who's been trying altering? I mean,
It's time to take the oar. It's time to take the oar.
I
haven't-
disagree.
We haven't tried altering in the way that Thomas Jefferson defined altering in 1798 in the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions. Is like Thomas Jefferson, he said is that when the federal government starts to step outside of its power, it's the duty of the states to either A, resist or interpose themselves and stop them. And it's like, right, the states, have just bent over backwards and let them do it because the federal government bought them off with a whole hell of a bunch of money. Until you go through a, bottom-up process of nullification through your state legislatures and saying, hey, it comes to a point, it's like when the federal government steps outside of this agreement that we made together, because the Constitution is a contract. It is a contract between several different states that the federal government, we're going to delegate this authority to them because the states created it. They created the federal government. They delegate its authority. And when it steps outside of that authority, we're going to put it back in its place.
right.
And they haven't done that. And until you
it's
do
a
that,
little late for that.
I
feel like.
don't know.
I don't think
Maybe it is, maybe it isn't.
the state of North Dakota is going to rise up against Washington. I don't think that's going to happen.
Well,
ever.
And the problem you run into with all of that too is that, like, I mean, that's the thing is the things that the federal government does, it can justify in its manner. And part of the problem, the preamble of the Constitution, promote the general welfare. That has been the justification for the overall. I appreciate that. I appreciate that reference. I'm in the final season. It's my favorite part of the show.
Oh, I love how much. Okay.
All right. Anyway, no, but is to promote the general welfare. Well, if that's part of your mandate, you can kind of do a lot of stuff that's promoting the general welfare.
But the problem is the people who ratified the Constitution in 1787, they had an idea of what general welfare meant, right? Is like they debated all of it, and they wrote down in these debates like what the general welfare meant. And the general welfare in the term of the Constitution is maintaining free commerce between the states and between foreign powers and maintaining a common defense.
We don't have completely free commerce between the states. Problem number one is there are a whole lot of interstate commerce regulations, which you deal with those, right?
There's less than you would think.
So, like that is an issue because there should be free commerce between the states, but that's me zeroing in on one particular issue.
Do you know who the biggest threat to interstate commerce is?
No.
States.
I mean,
that's the overall majority of when I deal with state taxation, but like that's a big deal. It's like when states start trying to impose taxes on that can be construed as people in other states.
Yeah,
that's a massive problem. Who's trying to do that, and what are they doing? I'm genuinely curious.
This is my favorite. This is one of my favorite court cases. I can't remember who it was. It was some crappy Western state. Like
there are a bunch of those. Nobody cares about them. Like Nevada
Wyoming
or something.
like Wyoming or Montana or something.
Okay. Yeah.
And they came up with this tax. It was like an extraction tax or whatever on coal in their state. So they said, hey, there's like a 20% levy on all the coal that's extracted in this state, and the mining companies have to pay this extraction tax on all the coal.
Jeez.
That they pull out of the state. And they did that knowing that like 80% of the coal was destined out of state. And so like Illinois sued them because like Illinois was like one of the biggest buyers of that coal. And they're like, dude, you're taxing people in Illinois on this coal because you know good and well it's not staying in your state.
Yeah.
And you're basically just taxing the people of Illinois for, coal that's coming out of your state that you're never going to use. And the Supreme Court actually was like, this is totally legal because they have a right to tax the stuff that's produced in their state. And the fact that it happens to go out of state and that cost gets passed on to the people of Illinois, it's their problem. and it's just the court upheld it. I think that's one of the most creative taxes I've ever seen, because that's what every state wants to do, is figure out a way to tax people in another state to pay for services in their state. And that's what occupancy tax is.
See, I have such a hard time backing any tax that arises out of a just regular ass commerce that you're going to have to do anyway. I'm not a fan of taxes in general, which I realize is the whole basis of your professional life. So I'm sorry to on what you do for a living.
I'm not offended, but I mean, it's.
But things like that seem hugely problematic. Income tax, sales tax, what the hell? Who decided that was a good idea? I get
in the 30s.
Yeah,
when they were paying for the new definition of welfare.
And why are we okay with that still?
I mean, that's the problem, is we haven't figured out a better way to pay for it. So I mean, and nobody appears to be willing to cut spending. So
it's true.
Oh, you can't cut spending now. You cut spending, it's all over. That's all she wrote.
That seems to be the case. I mean, you're dealing with a snowball that's just getting bigger and bigger, and if it's going to get any smaller, it's just going to have to burst. I mean, I don't see any way that this machine that's just going and going and going, I don't see how this machine ever stops.
Yeah, the only way it stops is either it just keeps going, which is not stopping, but the only way you get two options. The machine keeps going or crashes, and eventually it will keep going and crash. You can't put the milk back, the toothpaste back in the tube. Okay, the toothpaste,
right,
being the wealth of the American people, that's done for and gone. Okay, it's already been stolen. You ain't putting it back in there. So.
Whoa, that was bleak. That was real bleak.
Am I wrong?
I don't know. Look at the tax expert over here. Maybe he knows.
Yeah, I don't know.
Fair enough.
What would happen?
I mean, I think you're probably correct.
And I understand state taxation, not federal taxation.
Federal taxation also bothers me.
Yeah, what would happen if, the federal government disappeared tomorrow?
Well, that's such a broad question. It's
economically wise, okay?
I mean, probably mayhem, right?
Oh, yeah, everybody would lose all of their the trickle down would be everybody is losing all these federal backs, what's the word?
Subsidies.
Subsidies. Thank you. That's the word. And it'd just be chaos.
Yeah. Well, and you've got the whole problem that the question is the Federal Reserve still our banker nationally, because if they disappear, then I mean it is mass chaos. It's anarchy, because the only thing holding a lot of this together, right, is the fact that Joe Blow's gonna go get up in the morning and go to his job as a police officer in the National Guard or at whatever institution he works for, and he's going to get paid with these ones and zeros that show up in his bank account. That's what keeps him being a good citizen, because he can afford Netflix and air conditioning. If that disappears tomorrow, right?
Or vice versa.
Nobody knows what happened. No one knows what would happen after that, because we haven't dealt with that.
Yeah.
Nobody's dealt with the fallout of a meaningless currency, really, in modern history. It hasn't happened.
It's just kind of scary, don't you think?
You could argue that the currency of the Weimar Republic was pretty valueless. People used it to wallpaper their homes.
Okay, so what happened there?
Adolf Hitler rose to power, and then there was a Holocaust and war, and lots of people died. It's real sad.
There you go. Okay, so
that's what happens when you have a valueless currency.
It feels like we're barreling that direction, to me.
Oh, we're not close to that.
You don't think so?
Not the United States isn't. No. So that's.
I don't know, man. There's a lot of parallels between what's going on right now and what was going on in the Weimar Republic, especially culturally.
If you believe that, then that means Donald Trump is our Adolf Hitler. But anyway. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, even though I opened that can, and I would like to put Pandora back in her box.
You ever heard the wrong person when it comes to that?
You ever heard of Ingersoll Lockwood? Look him up.
No, and I'm sorry I opened this discussion. And what I was trying to say before I just was sarcastic was there are lots of economists that think the United States could have a national debt easily 5 times what it is currently. and it not be a problem.
The
at
national
all.
debt seems so. What does that even mean at the end of the day? The national debt seems so genuinely meaningless as far as the actual practical day-to-day life of you or Joe Blow down
Yeah.
the street. Like, if that's 100 times what it
Well,
is now, I mean, what's that going to change?
What I'm saying is that our economic system is not. It needs to be managed, but we're not teetering on the brink of oblivion. Like, we've got a long way to go before we get to, the kinds of situations like they have in Europe where, like, France or Italy or Greece, where they're going back and they're saying, hey, you were planning on pensions and government benefits, and we're slashing all of that because we can't afford it.
Right.
And by the way, we're going to gut our defense spending and we're not able to be ready for a war because we can't afford that either. We're a long way from being at that kind of state.
Well, we're always going to be able to afford it. Always. You know why? Because we print the money.
Well,
we could afford anything forever and always.
And that's one of the things. And we don't have time to go down talking about economic or not economic currency. Talk about currency and all the rest of it, but because the United States is kind of the backing currency behind all the global stuff, we have been relatively responsible compared to other governments when it comes to our national debt. But we could mess around a lot more with our national debt and be a whole lot less responsible with, our spending, because we're the biggest game in town and we're the currency that backs all the world economies.
Yeah, I mean, the national debt can go on forever. The idea that it's going to get out of control and the whole thing's going to blow up because the national debt is just going up and up, that is kind of dumb, because by nature, for the economy to go forward, the national debt will go forward. The problem is when the wealth of the people is all gone and the value of the people is all gone, and we basically become a proletariat serfs who the only thing we can contribute is our labor throughout our lifetime.
Which seems to be the way it's headed.
Right.
And the problem you get into is that happens as the national debt goes up, because the national debt going up is by nature of the system inflationary.
Well, even with
right,
that.
John.
Even with that idea, that could in theory go on forever, but how long is it going to take for people to wake up and realize they're slavery serfs? The problem is when people finally have enough, right? Because ultimately, the currency is backed by our belief in it. When that belief falls, that's when it's over. And the more and more you push people, and the more and more you push people into nihilism, the more and more that has a chance to take hold. And with this late-stage imperialism, cultural decay, the belief that's backing all this is whittling away.
You can feel it starting to shift.
That is a much bigger problem than the national debt that by definition has to go up.
Well, okay, two things here. A, that makes what you're saying does make I think a decent amount of sense, and I think you see it reflected in like all the shift away from, good, what was historically like good jobs, right, that you'd get with a company and you'd be able to afford, right, into the gig economy. We see that physically like manifested in our world in real time in the shift to the gig economy right now. And B, one of the things that blows my mind is how we back fiat currency with another fiat currency. Somebody explain how that practically works to me, because that seems like complete bullshit. It's like 5-year-olds playing house, trading fake money. Like, what the
Hey, you ever seen a can on the side of the road and you're coming up to it and you're like, man, I'm going to step on this can. You know how I solve it? I kick it.
Right.
And then I've got several more steps before I have to do the same thing again.
It's just such a wild concept.
The reason people have been okay with American fiat currency is that we do have, supposedly, huge gold reserves to back.
Oh, Thomas.
To back our thing.
That is the official story.
Now the thing on that is we're not committed to, like, historically, back in the old days, under the gold standard when Andrew Jackson tried to wreck the American economy.
No, Andrew Jackson.
No, he single-handedly caused the subsequent panic that his successor
He single-handedly was the
kicked out of
only
there.
president to ever stand up for this country. But we have fundamentally different philosophies. You're a Federalist. I'm a Democratic Republican.
You're missing out on the other.
Hey, let him keep talking.
Let the man
Missing
finish.
out on John Tyler, but keep going.
Yeah. But like, anyway, at the time, we were like, well, every dollar will be backed by an ounce of precious metal. And then it was kind of like, well, we're going to back every dollar with, some portion, or it's going to be partially backed by hard currency.
Right.
And then in the 70s, we're just like, we have hard currency. We're going to print the money we want to print. You do what you want with it. And that's what it went to.
Which seems insane.
And people are like, well, it's probably good because they've got gold somewhere, right? Like,
yeah.
in Fort Knox.
And that's the thought process.
Nobody's been in there since the 50s, right? Or 60s, or whenever the last time they let people in to see the gold vault. But
right. What's actually in there? Is there gold? Maybe. Maybe there's not. We don't know.
We need to do an episode on that. That's a whole rabbit hole.
That would be interesting.
Fort Knox.
We should do that. Yeah, that'd take a hot minute.
I'll watch that one.
Yeah, I'd watch that one too. But it's just that it's backed by our faith in it, and that blows my mind. But the idea that we can have another currency that's kind of backed by our fake currency is just insane.
Well, that's why
it's moneyception.
That's why American cash is king, and everybody else, stuff sucks.
Yeah, that's why. Well, I don't even know what. Are they still on euros over there in the socialist countries? Is that still a thing? The euro?
Yeah, except in England, they still use the pound.
Right.
Which is like
the sterling,
falling faster than an airplane with no engines.
It is all. It doesn't matter what you use. It's based on U.S. dollars. Bretton Woods, baby.
Yeah.
It's. I don't care if you call it a pound. I don't care if you call it a yin yang. I don't care if you call it a shamalama ding dong. You're using U.S. dollars. And the Federal Reserve's printing it.
The big bank.
With potentially one exception. Nobody knows what the heck is happening in Iran.
That's true. Do they still not have a centralized bank?
They're mostly honor killing their women.
That's what they say. I don't know.
Honor killing their women?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It means their woman did something that they don't approve of. So to protect her honor and the honor of the family, she must be executed, of course.
Oh. That seems rational to me.
She showed her ankle, or forgot to wear a veil or something.
Right.
Or a headscarf.
Okay. Wow. That was bleak.
Yeah, if they show any cleavage, they're just stoned on the spot. They don't even bother.
I do
have
not
a trial for that.
I do not know anything about Muslims or Sharia law or anything. I have a Quran. I want to read it. I just know.
I started down that path one time, and I was too young to finish it and or fully comprehend what I was reading.
All I know is they potentially don't play ball, and that's why they're getting so much
It doesn't
crap.
seem like they do, but I also don't know that much about Iran as a country. I know we were thinking about bombing them for a minute.
That's all. J.D. Vance jacks off the bombing Iran. That's all he talks about.
He came back out and said he wasn't
Let me
for
bomb
bombing
Iran.
Iran. He's not
Did
for
he say
bombing
that?
Iran now.
Did he say that?
He did, yeah.
Do
On an interview.
y'all remember when Ted Cruz said he wanted to carpet bomb Damascus? That was a great line.
No, but
I laughed at him when he said it.
Sounds like a Ted Cruz thing.
It was a very Ted Cruz thing to say.
I just remember when Donald Trump called his wife a dog in
Yeah.
debate in 2016.
Ted's wife,
That was
ugly
awesome.
as a dog. She's ugly. I don't like her. Ted's ugly too. I don't like him.
This is devolving
terrible.
quickly.
That's fine.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, man.
Yeah.
Do y'all want to put a nice bow on it for your viewers?
I think it's about that time. Yeah. So, conflict in Ukraine's wild.
Yep.
I watch it with great interest.
Hey, it's the Ukraine. None of us have showed respect. Isn't it the Ukraine?
I don't know.
Is that like when people say
I'm
the
not from
Ohio State
Yeah.
University?
Screw the Ohio State.
Yeah.
University.
Carson, why'd you bring that up?
I'm sorry. I don't
Okay.
watch football. I don't.
I will
really-
be on the record for that. Screw them.
Yeah.
Fair.
That was terrible.
Wasn't there a thing where like a bunch of Tennessee fans were going
Don't
around
even.
at Ohio State?
Don't even. Look, just leave it. Just leave it. Let it
You
die.
don't know about what you talk.
I
and you
don't.
should
That's
be
why I'm
quiet.
asking. I'm curious.
No. I will take you out back and educate you later.
I feel like I'm gonna get beaten behind the woodshed.
It was
Mostly.
bad.
I'm a little turned on.
You know, you said the Iron Curtain fell. The Steel Curtain has also fallen. It's
We're still gonna make the playoffs. It'll be all right.
yeah. Giving up 30 points.
I miss Ben Roethlisberger so
Football.
very much.
Merc.
I didn't realize that it would be a long wilderness between him and whoever's really next.
Football.
But when Terry Bradshaw retired in 1981, it was 23 years until we found Big Ben. Neil O'Donnell took us to a Super Bowl, but Deion Sanders like single-handedly like crushed all our hopes and dreams.
Are you talking about the Steelers? Is that what
Yes,
you're talking about
yes,
now?
that's
Okay.
exactly what I'm talking about.
All right.
Yeah,
The only reason I knew that is because I know your family are historically Steelers fans. That's all I know about them.
Well, the Titans is like a bunch of Down syndrome people out there throwing the ball. So at least y'all can put
at the
something
risk of hurting your viewing audience. I grew up in Tennessee and knew lots of Titans fans. I actively hate the Titans and love to watch them fail. I feel like it's a massive karma-inducing event for me to say that, and that is bringing all kinds of evil on me and my Pittsburgh Steelers. But I hate the Titans that much, and I feel that passionately about it. I wish them ill always.
That's fair. I feel like this won't make it any better, but my father had that same viewpoint about the Titans.
Really?
Yeah.
I think your father and I feel differently about that for different reasons.
Yeah.
Same about that for different reasons.
But probably. My dad was just an ass and hated hearing people
May he rest in peace.
be happy. Yeah, R.I.P. Old boy.
I feel like we should say, may he rest in peace. Otherwise, we're just, may as well go over there and, desecrate his grave.
I don't even know how to get back to it, but I don't know where it's at.
Jeez, this has devolved.
Carson.
It'll be all right.
It's somewhere
Let's take a drink.
All right. Ukraine's wild. Currency's even more wild.
We'll be back.
Thomas, thanks for doing this, buddy. It's been fun.
I love you guys.
Yeah, it's been a good one.
Yeah, it's been a great time.
We'll be back for episode 35 in a week.
Yeah. See you guys then. Bye.